It's the Larry O'Connor Show on AM 790 KABC, and we welcome President of the Los Angeles County Bar Association, Brian Kabateck. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Kabateck.
Hey, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
I'm interested in, I've seen these headlines go that the state of California is weighing doing away with all court fees. Is that across the board, or is it just for people who meet a sort of an income litmus test if they can't afford it?
Yeah, we're not sure exactly yet what it's going to be. Of course, there'd be a question there if it was based upon need or ability to pay, what the criteria would be and how they'd meet that criteria, because people's situation and conditions change all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And but the basis of this was a lawsuit of a woman in poverty, a homeless woman, who was jailed because she couldn't pay the court fees, right?
Right. It's a horrible situation. It's, the crime of being poor, and we don't want to create a situation where, and maybe we actually have created a situation in California where people are being sent to prison like debtor's prison simply because they can't pay a court fee. And remember, we're differentiating this from fines, legitimate fines that are levied for some kind of misconduct where people have to pay them. These are court costs and court fees, and if people can't pay them, like in this particular situation with this woman, she's being locked up and put away to prison. And I don't think that's the kind of society we want to have. It certainly isn't the kind of world that we promote, and we want to see people being able to pay their debts to society, but being functional in society, and it costs everybody when somebody's sent away to prison. So it doesn't make any sense at all.
Can you explain the distinction between a fine and a court fee?
Sure. So let's just take the simplest example of all, which might be a speeding ticket. So you get a speeding ticket, and thankfully, now I'm going to completely curse myself, but thankfully I haven't gotten one in a long time. Right, but which means sometime later today the CHP is going to pull me over.
No, because let's be real, the traffic is always so bad. You're lucky if you get under 10 miles under the speed limit, let alone 10 or 15 over the speed limit.
Right, any given day I'd pray for 10 miles less than the speed limit, right? Rather than 5 miles an hour. Exactly. So in that kind of situation, you get a moving violation, and there's a fine associated with it. I'm going 10 miles over the speed limit, and the fine that I get is X, Y, or Z, and that's the fine for that. Then they tag on to that court costs or court fees, and sometimes that can double or even triple the amount of the fine. And it's those costs that we're specifically talking about here, eliminating and doing away with. And that's my understanding based on the case we're talking about today. That's exactly what ended up getting this woman put into prison, is because she couldn't pay the court fees.
So this woman paid the fine, but not the court fees. But if a judge orders you to pay a fine and or a court fee, it's really a distinction without a difference. It is a cost that you must bear at a court's ruling, right? I mean, why do we even make the distinction?
Right, and I don't know where it started. I don't know where it came from. I know I've been practicing law for 30 years, and these court costs and fees have crept up over time. And my understanding now is that the state of California is carrying something like in the neighborhood of $1 billion in uncollected fees. And here's a little hint to the state of California and to the governor: you're not going to get them. They're not coming back. I mean, let's be realistic. They're going out to collection agencies, and collection agencies are trying to track these down. And really, it's not just the threat that people have of being locked up because of this, Larry. It's also the fact that they affect people's lives. They can't, they get a job and they suddenly get a garnishment order because of something like this. It affects their jobs. Sure. It affects their livelihood. Yeah, it's really terrible.
So who sets these court fees? Because it sounds like it's a tax on a lawbreaker, basically. Does the Assembly, does Sacramento say here's what the court fees are, or is it up to the judge's discretion?
Neither. It's not something that's set by the Assembly. It's probably set by the state. The Judicial Council of the state of California sets them. It may be statutory in the sense that they have to determine them, but judges don't have any discretion in these at all. I mean, in rare cases they can waive them, but more often than not, if you have been in either a misdemeanor court or a traffic court, it's so perfunctory and it's so sort of administrative. It's you're fined this much, your court costs are this much. Pay the clerk. Have a nice day.
So if in fact the state and by the way, who would make the determination here to do away with court fees? Does that require statute?
Yeah, that would be from the legislature.
All right. So if they do determine to do this, I mean, obviously this is income, that money's going somewhere. Well, let me ask you this first. Are they really court fees? I mean, does the money actually go to the court and pay for the administrative costs of processing these fines or the imprisonment or whatever? Or is this just money that ends up in a lockbox, or not a lockbox, in some, slush fund in Sacramento that they use for the general fund?
No, it doesn't end up in a slush fund in Sacramento. It does go to the courts and the court system, and they collect this money. They collect these fines, and they use them for the administration of justice and for the court system, which has been, substantially defunded the last decade, and money starting to come back into it. But the truth is, and if you ask the Judicial Council, you ask around, this money doesn't make that much difference in the scheme of things. It helps, but it doesn't make that much difference. It's also not going specifically to the court, to the traffic system or the court. It goes into the general fund for the courts.
So I mean, because that's the next question. If they stop charging court fees, then where does the money come from? And obviously the answer is it comes out of the budget, which means it comes out of our taxes.
Right. True, but I don't think you're going to see that much. I mean, I don't think you're going to see that much difference in your paycheck or in your sales taxes if these are eliminated. And in fact, what you may actually see is a reduction in the cost of administration of justice, in the sense that people are being put in jail and imprisoned because they can't pay the fees. That costs us a heck of a lot more money than the amount of fees that they're paying.
Oh, I see. So, that's interesting. Have they actually done the sort of the delta on that, or actuarially figured out what the cost benefit is on this? Because that's an important factor, I would think.
That would be. I haven't seen those numbers, but that would be. I don't know if they've done that analysis.
Well, what's the timeline on this? When should a decision be made? Has the bill been proposed, and how do you think this is going?
That's my understanding, and if it's proposed, it could be emergency legislation and go into effect right away, or more likely than not, it'll take effect January 1st, 2020, which will be here before we know it.
Brian Kabateck is the president of the Los Angeles County Bar Association. I mean, one last question. Listen, if somebody's impoverished, they get a fine of some kind, they pay their fine, but then they start racking up these court fees, which, sound like a little bit of an arbitrary and ambiguous, outside of the statute kind of extra penalty. That's one thing. But what about the people who are just jerks? What about the people who have the money and are just scofflaws? And they've been ignoring it. You just said there's $1 billion there outstanding. They've just thumbed their nose at the system. They're trying to get away with it. I mean, why should they cut you brag?
Right. So if you're asking me my opinion, I think that it should be based upon need, which is saying how we started this conversation. And I think that it should be ability to sort of be reassessed on an ongoing basis, because someone who is gainfully employed today may not be 6 months from now, and vice versa. So if you're really designing a system that's fair to everybody, it should be based on some sort of ability to pay and need, because a guy who's making $100,000 a year shouldn't get the same benefit because somebody's not working or unemployed or below the poverty line, right?
So then in that case, the wealthier lawbreakers will be making up for the impoverished lawbreakers. And, of course, the great lesson here and the way to avoid all this is don't break the law.
Well, right. But, we've already jinxed my chances with the CHP later this afternoon.
That's right. Good luck. Good luck. They're coming after you now.
Thanks so much,
that's okay. I know a good lawyer if you need one. That's Brian Kabateck. He's the president of the L.A. County Bar Association.